is actually my 25th one. I usually begin the town hall by talking about the latest COVID numbers as of September 30th. In the United States, we have 7.2 million cases with 206,005 deaths. In Florida, we have 704,568 cases with 14,388 deaths. And that would include my district, which is parts of Orange and Seminole County. So in Orange County, we've had 40,328 cases with 458 deaths. And in Seminole County, we've had 9,097 cases with 214 deaths. And then we usually compare with the Rebecca Jones dashboard, looking to see how different those are. In Florida, she has looks like about 500 more deaths. And in Orange County, she has only 6 more deaths. In Seminole County, it looks like about 3 more deaths. And also she keeps track of the Florida prisons, which we have 22,791 cases in the Florida prisons with 135 deaths. Right now, as of September, as of this past week, the testing has come back at 4.8%. Actually, that's of September 20th. We're a little behind on that. Seminole County is coming back at 3.47% positivity, and Orange County at 4.55%. And as I'm hearing, we are getting upticks on the cases, probably resulting from schools reopening. I just also heard that we've been talking a lot about the universities opening and the upticks in the younger people. Now those are spreading to all age groups, which again is not real surprising. I'm very happy today to introduce Jonathan Weber. He is the Deputy Director at the Florida Conservation Voters. And at this time, I would like him to give us a little background of his group. And then he's going to talk to us about Amendment 4, which is on our ballot this November 3rd. Thank you, Jonathan, for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Representative, and thank you so much for your leadership during this really extraordinary time. I mean, I imagine it's always tough to be an elected official, but during the pandemic, this just must be a really stressful time for you and all of your colleagues. So really thank you for your leadership and putting in the work to make sure as many Floridians stay safe as possible. So thank you for that. And greetings to everyone watching. My name is Jonathan Weber. I am the Deputy Director of Florida Conservation Voters. I'm talking today from frigid Tallahassee. We're at 52 degrees this morning up here, so I am certainly trying to keep warm. But thanks so much for inviting me to speak today. You may remember that Florida Conservation Voters is the organization that grew out of the successful Water and Land Conservation Amendment campaign in 2014. I do know that we had many volunteers and some supporters from in and around your district. Central Florida right there was a really a wonderful place for us during that campaign. So if anyone is watching who helped out with that, thank you so much. And what I'm going to talk about today is definitely going to relate to kind of the work that you put in 2014. So this is an important issue. Of course, I'm here to talk about Constitutional Amendment number 4, which would mandate that all future constitutional amendments must pass in 2 successive general elections. Unfortunately, this amendment, just by chance, I think, received the same ballot number as the landmark 2018 Restoration Rights Amendment, which passed by a significant margin, just 2 years ago. So to avoid confusion, we are calling the 2020 amendment simply number 4. And I encourage everyone listening to do the same. We'd hate to have any confusion there. So number 4 it is for the rest of my speech here. So the ability of citizens to amend their state constitution is firmly and clearly established in the Florida Constitution. It is a right expressly reserved to the people of Florida, not the legislature or the governor. Our Constitution was redrafted and ratified in 1968. And since that time, Floridians, just like you, have organized, put on the ballot and voted to pass constitutional amendments to improve our state when the Florida legislature refused or was unwilling to act for whatever reasons. So the entire reason why the Florida Constitution had to be rewritten in 1968 was because it had become virtually impossible to amend unless a small handful of powerful legislators in Tallahassee agreed to place an amendment on the ballot. So to avoid this type of constitutional gridlock in the future, the 1968 Constitution created the Citizens Initiative process and the Constitutional Revision Commission. Number 4 could lead to the same type of dangerous gridlock that could make it impossible for any type of meaningful reform in the future. It's a tool that has proved useful time and again for a large host of nonpartisan issues, from conservation funding to fair districts, to the net ban, to term limits, medical marijuana, class size. I mean, all these issues and more that millions of Floridians consider important were the product of the Citizens Initiative process. So make no mistake, number 4 is a direct attack on your constitutional rights as provided in the Florida Constitution. So like I said earlier, if approved, this amendment would require that all statewide ballot questions must pass in 2 successive general elections. And don't forget, here in Florida, our threshold for approval is 60%, which is hard to get to, honestly. Personally, I believe that Florida voters are smart enough to vote on amendments without having to vote a second time. And the very notion of having to vote twice is really, kind of an insult to the intelligence of voters like you and me. Number 4 essentially gives well-funded amendment opponents an unfair do-over every time voters approve an amendment. So if approved, number 4 will, first of all, it will nearly double the number of proposals that will be on each ballot, adding to the length and complexity of the ballot. And that is honestly a problem that I hear about in my job every single election year, is people complaining about these long ballots that take an extremely long time to figure out and decipher. And that is one problem why we see drop off at the end of the ballot from voters. So we hate to make voting any more difficult or confusing than it already is. Vote by mail certainly remedies some of that, but that's a different story. So all these amendments that get on the ballot, first of all, those are rarely the citizens' fault to begin with. I mean, it's largely the legislature that puts a lot of these amendments on the ballot because they have the power to do so and in a different mechanism. So since 1968, about 80% of the amendments that made it to the ballot were placed there by legislators or their appointees on the Constitutional Revision Commission or another commission. So these legislative referred amendments will continue to be put forward even if there are no citizens' initiatives. So who is behind this amendment? Unfortunately, because of some campaign finance laws, it's exactly kind of hard to see who is pushing this amendment. There's an entity that has kind of been kept in the shadows that showed up last year with a bunch of money and has kind of obscured all donors through political and accounting tricks. The one person associated with number 4 refuses to name the donors, which means the people of Florida have no way to know who's giving the millions of dollars that are funding this effort and why they are behind it. I will say the Orlando Sentinel, which is your, I guess your paper right there in Central Florida, has done some excellent reporting on the kind of trying to piece together, the weird kind of network of where the money's coming from and who's supporting it and who's not supporting it. I will leave that to you all to look up and read, and you can see kind of how they're putting it together and kind of see some of the organizations and the large corporate entities that are supporting this amendment in their own way behind the scenes, which is, I think, extremely interesting. And again, this is a great testament to the value of local journalism because this work took a lot of time, and it's one of our only resources to learn about some of these big money items that are happening in our elections. So thank you to the Orlando Sentinel for that. So definitely check that out. So to be clear, Florida was already one of the hardest states to get a ballot question from concept to on the ballot to approved by the Supreme Court and then ultimately approved by voters. And the past 2 legislative sessions have made it even more difficult. But in politics, difficult doesn't necessarily mean difficult. It really just means more expensive. And that severely limits grassroots groups and citizens from acting on their constitutional right and puts the power clearly in the hands of millionaires and billionaires who can afford, armies of lawyers and signature gatherers and campaign teams and slick PR firms to sell their idea. In fact, last year, when these bills were brought up in committee and on the floor, there were some legislators who were calling it the ballots for billionaires bill, because that's exactly where this issue is being pushed to, only into the hands of the extremely, extremely wealthy and corporate interests, and out of the hands of just regular people like you and me. So number 4 really is a power grab and ties in perfectly with kind of this long-standing eagerness to minimize or take away this right from citizens. So time and again, voters have used the amendment process to make our state better, and we should not give up that power. So here we are, about a month away from the election, if anyone's counting. I know I'm talking to probably a really high voting group right now and high interest group, but of course it's always a really good time to make sure that everyone is registered and ready to go. And please make sure that you are researching everything on your ballot. There's a lot of important amendments, and there are some local amendments, I believe, in Orlando and probably Seminole as well. I know of a couple in Orlando, county referenda. It's important to make sure you're looking those up and learning about them, seeing who's supporting them, who's not supporting them, looking up campaign finance laws. That's my favorite thing to do. So one interesting thing that I can briefly touch on here is that research from Stanford University suggests that voters are more likely to complete their ballot when voting at home. Due to the pandemic, of course, which Representative, so sadly but eloquently stated the current status of at the beginning of this conference. Due to the pandemic and the substantial registration efforts, more voters than ever have signed up to vote by mail in 2020. And there's plenty of time to still do so. But one thing that I think is really interesting is that we will be seeing more people, voting from home with their smartphone in hand. And they're going to be able to research and learn about maybe these questions that if they were in the ballot box, they might be, a little nervous or feeling pressured because there's a line outside and you got your kid with you or whatever it might be. Now we're actually going to have some time to sit down and research these items and learn more about them, which I think is excellent. So with the luxury of researching candidates and issues from their home, voters will rely on trusted online messengers to make sure that they understand what's going on. So there is a really great website that I'll tell you about. It's called www.knowNumber4.org. This was put together by the League of Women Voters, who of course is a nonpartisan organization, and I think is still one of the most trusted names in all of politics across the country. And thank you to them for their leadership. It's a wonderful website. I'll say it again, www.knowNumber4.org. Definitely check it out. It has a full kind of summary of everything about Amendment 4, Number 4, and you can learn from there. I do strongly encourage everyone to, reach out to your networks via social media, or if you have a community bulletin board or whatever it might be. If you have a fax machine, fax your friends. I don't know if those still exist, but definitely do that and tell them about the dangers of Number 4. So I just want to close on saying, there is a large coalition of groups working together as best they can with precious little resources to educate voters across the state about Number 4. And it's not only effective when we work together, but to me, it's inspiring, and it really gives me hope that Floridians are listening and ready to take control of their future. So make sure that you are talking to your friends and neighbors. Don't let the special interest take this right away from citizens. It was given to us for a reason, so that citizens can act as a check on the legislature and make sure that we are getting the larger bipartisan issues through when the legislature can't for whatever reason it might be. This right belongs to us. Let's hold on to it. And together, I think we're going to beat this thing as long as we're talking to everyone. So that's our job. That's our homework, is that make sure you're talking about this with your friends and neighbors as soon as possible. So again, my name is Jonathan Weber. Thank you so much. I'm happy to have a larger discussion, or if there's any questions in the chat, I can answer those as well.
Well, thank you, Jonathan, so much for bringing this to our attention. And I really like that you made that distinction with Amendment 4, because I know people must have been completely confused, because we're still talking about Amendment 4 from the last election, still fighting over that one. And I love that you're calling it Number 4. I'm going to start doing that too. I have to train myself. Also, I don't think people realize even what's on the ballot until they actually get their ballot. And that's why we're trying to cover all these. The other thing that I'm realizing too is this number 4 is a huge, important amendment. And we really have to get the word out, because a lot of times people will vote yes just because it sounds all right. You know, who cares? They just vote yes. So we really need to get the word out. And I was going to mention, I just this morning saw the League of Women Voters list of all their positions on the entire ballot. So I'm going to be sharing that as well. I just read it. Didn't have time to really read everything, but they were absolutely, of course, against this one. And they're against a lot of the other amendments that are on the ballot as well. In fact, I think, let's see, I don't have it in front of me, but there are only 1 or 2 of them, because I know they're against 5 and 6 and 4 and 3. And that's why we're doing this. So we're going to get somebody on to talk about those other amendments as well. Could you tell us what the Florida Conservation Voters Organization is pushing as far as our next session, the clean water bill? What are you looking for our legislature to do? And also, if you have the information, maybe talk about what was passed this last session. We all know that we don't really know what's going to happen with the budget, so we don't know if everything that was done is going to come to fruition, but tell us a little bit about that.
Definitely. And, you know, I'll just start, you mentioned the budget here, and I'll start there, is that, so we know for a fact that next year we're going to enter a tighter budget year, which makes everything more difficult. One thing I will add, though, is that thanks to the Water and Land Conservation Amendment from 2014, that money for conservation is actually constitutionally set aside in a bucket called the Land Acquisition Trust Fund, and can only be spent on certain things like Everglades restoration, buying land for parks and recreation, land management, things like that. So we know that because of this amendment, that there will be some money. I'm not sure how much it'll be yet. We can look that up and we'll find out more as we get closer to session. We can find out, and we know that money has to go to a certain like place. So they can't essentially rate it, as we've seen in years past with different things, and that word is kind of thrown around, but that can't really happen in the full extent. Of course, there can be misspending, we've seen that, but I think for the most part, we're going to see conservation money in some form protected, thankfully, because what voters said is that no matter what, we have to make sure we're spending on things like water quality. So we'll keep fighting and making sure that priorities for the environment don't get entirely cut. You know, we saw, strangely, in the governor's vetoes at the end of this session, you know, some really important water quality and other environmental items were cut from the budget. I think it was every water project, actually. I think every single water project that every legislator had got cut this year, which is, you know, I understand there was a recession coming. We all know that. But at the same time, what a terrible thing is that the things we have to cut are the things that protect our water, which is what our kids drink. You know? So that's that. But going forward, we'll make sure that we're talking about all those items with every legislator that'll listen. So at FCV, we kind of have 4 pillars that we stand on, that we look for every single year at the legislative session. Number 1, and these are in no order really, number 1 is climate change and clean energy. Climate change is a huge threat that we're trying to make sure that Florida kind of gets a grip of, or at least has an understanding of what are the steps we need to do in the next 10 years, really less than that, that can set us on a path to clean energy as soon as possible. There's some huge questions to that, and trying to figure that out is the hard part. So I personally think that we need a large kind of multi-agency kind of plan that can really put together, like, where are our carbon emissions coming from? How can we better curb them? What's the fastest way we can start transitioning to clean energy in a just way? So these are some big questions that can be solved at the legislature. They can start that process. Of course, there's a million other ways to increase clean energy, and we'll be looking at that as well. certainly in light of all the hurricanes we had in recent years, getting solar panels up on some of our first responder stations, firehouses, shelters, things like that. I mean, why wouldn't we do that just to have power all the time? This makes sense. So that's climate change. Land conservation, because we grew out of the Water and Land Conservation Amendment, we're always trying to make sure that our parks and our natural areas are protected, and that we are continuing to acquire new parks and conservation areas, because Florida is still growing. Certainly, Representative, in your area, I mean, it's just been remarkable growth over the past few decades. It seems like every time I go down to Central Florida, it's like I got to reorient myself to where I am, because there's new developments and new things and new shopping centers everywhere. So trying to make sure that we are growing in a smart way, because we're not going to stop growth and no one can do that. We're not planning on that. But let's just do it in a thoughtful, smart way to make sure that Florida's quality of life is protected. I mean, people move to Florida for a reason. It's because we're gorgeous, we have great weather, we have ample public areas and parks, and we got to make sure it stays that way, looking way into the future. 100 years from now is where we should be thinking. So making sure that funding maintains and that we're protecting those places is also very important. Now, the interesting thing in Florida is that when you protect land, you are protecting water in Florida, because of how close our water and land are intertwined. I mean, Florida is a lot of wetlands here, right? I mean, we've got the Everglades, number one, and number two, I mean, there's wetlands everywhere. And to making sure that we are not losing any more wetlands than we already have, and protecting, enhancing, restoring wetlands that are left is really, really it's vital to the health of our water going forward. So number one, we believe in natural solutions over engineered solutions. It's that idea, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? Is what they say. So if we're protecting our key aquifer recharge areas, our wetlands, now our springs, of course, which are just remarkable. If we're protecting those now, we're gonna have to do a lot less remediation, 10 years from now, or even, just currently, right? I mean, we're seeing the problems right now in our springs, and we could have staved off a lot of those problems if we invested more 20 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever it might be. So moving into water quality, last year we did have a water bill. It was largely supported in the House and Senate. I will say that there were some significant missed opportunities in that bill. And while overall, I mean, I think that we need to be pushing and moving the ball forward as much as we can in any way we can, there are significant opportunities next year to really make sure we're kind of shoring up the things that weren't covered in the bill this year. A lot of the requirements in water quality standards, they are voluntary, and it'd be great if we made them mandatory and enforceable, and that we can actually check up on them to make sure that people are playing by the rules. Personally, I mean, I'm a parent, I have an 8-year-old, and I tell my kid all the time, you clean up your own mess. That's your mess. That's your job. You clean it up. And that's the same exact thing I would say to any polluter or my neighbor or anybody. If you make a mess, you clean it up. It shouldn't be your neighbors to clean up your mess for you. So the polluter should pay, I think. And we need to make sure that we're enforcing that as realistically as possible going forward. And then the last thing that we also look for is voting rights. We're Florida conservation voters, so we believe very strongly that the more people vote, our environment wins, and we want to make sure that we have, ample and easy access to every eligible voter in the state of Florida. I mean, it's just core to our republic. It's who we are as Americans, and making sure that we have easy voting that is safe and secure, to me, is a real priority. So those 4 things I'll be looking for next year. Water, of course, is at the top of the list, along with climate change, making sure that as we grow and as the climate is changing, we're relying on trusted science so we can have the best possible policies going forward. I mean, we're talking about, it's our future here, and Florida is so fragile. We just need to do everything we can. And again, thank you for everything you did last year. I mean, I know you are always a caring, thoughtful representative, and that's exactly what we need.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Do you think that with our crisis that we're in and having to build back, would you agree that this is an excellent opportunity to focus more on solar energy? It just seems like a given to me. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100% is that, really, I think that with solar, what a remarkable opportunity we have to rebuild Florida's economy and the whole country, really. I mean, solar is, we know right now, the cheapest form of energy in the world, certainly in Florida. So why not have more solar panels on people's roofs or in other areas. And the great thing about solar is that it creates jobs because you need people to install them. You need people to maintain them. And then my favorite part about it is that a lot of these products can be made right here in America, which is always a good thing and boosts our economy. And I would love it if Florida, by the way, the Sunshine State, if we could be a global leader in solar energy. And I just think we are on like a really sitting on top of a wonderful opportunity to transform our economy into a green economy, unlock the power of American entrepreneurism, and get solar panels up on people's houses, on top of schools and buildings, businesses, you know, every strip mall you see in Florida. I mean, we've all flown in, right, over Florida, over Miami or Orlando, and it's just a sea of urban built out areas. And all it is roofs and air conditioners. It's all you see. Like, why not put solar panels up there? It's just, it's mind-boggling, but it's going to take some leadership to make it happen. And I couldn't agree with you more, Representative. The green economy is at our fingertips if we want it, and we just got to need leadership to make it happen.
Yay, that's a great speech. We have a school I toured that's around here. It's not actually in my district, it's right in the neighboring district, but it is powered by solar power, and it was an incredible tour to see it all. And they're also, the kids that come in there are it's all STEM related. It's a very, and of course I can't remember the name of the school off the top of my head right now, but I thought of that when you said schools, because those are usually out there, not under a bunch of trees, but they would be perfect for putting solar.
Yeah, and wouldn't it save money for the school district itself as well? I mean, we know in long run it will save everyone a bunch of money. And like with the budgets being cut, like we talked about, and schools scrimping and saving wherever they can to help pay teachers and make sure kids have the materials they need to learn, and also in these days be protected as they go back to school. It's like we need to be saving money, and what a great way to do that by installing solar panels. Great idea, excellent.
Absolutely, I agree. Is there any questions in the chat for us, Haley?
There are not right now, but for folks listening, feel free if you have questions to drop them in the chat.
Yeah. Let's see, what else would you like to talk about? How about, are you able to talk about your position on the proposed legislation by the governor last week to limit protesting?
You know, I'll just tell you right flat out, you know, we haven't taken a formal position on that, but I will tell you in general is that, you know, civic engagement is core to our business here at Florida Conservation Voters, and making sure that everyone has the ability to express themselves in a safe, non-threatening kind of way is, I think, remarkably important for who we are. Again, it's built into our nation. We're a nation built on protest, and that is what makes our country so great, is that we can petition our government peacefully when we choose. And anything that I think makes people think twice about that is not okay. I mean, that's just anti-American. So trying to find a common ground here, I don't think that legislation is going to go anywhere. I mean, I've heard they're actually going to come back for a special session on that. Have you heard that? Is that going to happen? Are we going to get a special session in November?
What I heard is that it would be an organizational session. So, right, I mean, we have an organizational session as soon as we're elected. We have I think it's a week or 2 weeks to be sworn in, and that's called organizational session. But normally there's no bills passed during organizational session, because it's usually just a ceremonial type session and just the requirement of our Constitution, not something where we would actually hear bills. And something like that would need to go through all the committees. Now they can speed it through, and that's what I've heard, rumors that they're trying to speed it through, but that the lack of transparency and accountability to do something that comprehensive, I mean, that really is such an important piece of legislation, and to speed it through would just be such a disservice to our state. I don't even see the point of doing that. If we do some kind of legislation like that, I think we need to focus on the resources to the police for them to be adequately trained in racial bias, and that's where we need to put the resources, not in keeping protesters, peaceful protesters from protesting. It just seems very political, and to say we're going to do it in November, it's even more obvious that it's a political act, not something that is common sense legislation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agreed. And so we'll see if that materializes up here, right? I mean, maybe I'll be seeing you sooner in November, who knows? But it was kind of a wild moment. That was almost like, is this really happening? Am I reading this correctly? But we'll see. I mean, it's been a crazy year, and it's unfortunate to see, the governor take kind of what seems like a political move like that on an issue which is so remarkably important to everyone, whether they recognize it or not. It's an incredibly important issue that we'll see. I don't know, but I'll tell you right now, every civic engagement group in the state of Florida is going to be fighting this bill. So if they do bring it up and it does get to a committee, I mean, they better book the whole day down there in the basement of the House, because they're going to get everyone to come into that meeting room and speak against it. You can count on me being there, I'm sure, because we will always defend civic engagement rights in Florida, always.
Yeah, and will we all be in hazmat suits by then? Because the way we're going, it's not looking good. We're not getting control of this virus, not at all. And so we have to contend with that. As you know, in Tallahassee, the elevators are packed full, and it's just, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what they're going to do either. But, I remember last year, I was in the balcony in the House. I'm sure you were there when they closed a session for like that hour and had to wipe everything down, and Representative Pigman was like observing the whole thing. Yeah, that was kind of like, what a surreal moment that was to watch these guys come in their full, garb, the hazmat suit, right, and wipe everything down. And it's like, really, you just walk around anywhere in the Florida Capitol. I mean, it's such a used building. There's thousands of people and kids and everyone just walking around touching everything. I mean, I don't know. I mean, my wife's probably gonna make me, sleep in the guest room, not gonna come into the rest of the house when I go home at night, because I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how. And when you talk about that surreal moment, I remember that so well, because we were rushed out of there. I actually went back there's a place that we have like a break room where we have food when we're in session. And I went back there, and so you would think those supposedly hazmat people were actually hazmat people. They were our kitchen staff that were sent out there to clean. And it was unbelievable, because they were like, we're kitchen staff. Why are we having to do this? So looking back at that this is what the kind of leadership we have handling our COVID crisis. Because at that point I didn't know a lot about the virus. Just what I had heard on the news. That was, when was that? That was the beginning of March, I believe.
Yeah, March 8th or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was just hearing about it, but I was mystified that they were sending the kitchen staff out there to do the cleaning. And then we were told to just stand by. We just stood out in the hallways for 2-3 hours, because they made it sound like it would be 15-20 minutes, but then it was more like 2-3 hours. And then we went back into the chamber, and the legislators who were suspected to have been in contact with COVID were also back there with us. And I said, well, why are they back here? They answered all the questions that they had asked them, and I guess they took their temperature. Even though they were exposed to the virus, they put them back in the room with us. So I realized that was a long time ago, and maybe it wouldn't have gone down like that now, but
maybe. Yeah, I didn't realize that was kitchen staff. That's shocking to me. And really, I mean, you know, I'm so thankful to the staff over at the legislature now. I mean, like all the service staff that help out there. I mean, they're quality, amazing workers that we have here in Tallahassee, but asking them to go in and all of a sudden do, you know, medical cleanup. I mean, that's crazy. I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. And yeah, and I don't blame Pigman for that, because it was just, he was, I actually was glad that he was taking it seriously, because I think that there wasn't even going to be anything done, and he got wind of it somehow, and that's how it happened, because I really think our leadership was not going to do anything.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I saw there's a thing on the New York Times website today with the whole 20-minute video on kind of tracing the start of the coronavirus, actually going back to 2005, from when President George W. Bush installed the first pandemic playbook, is what they call it, tracing that to where we are today and kind of the leadership missteps that have happened. I think it's really well done. It's worth watching. If anyone wants to, I mean, agree or disagree, it's just a well done piece. I agree with it, but you can take a look. It's good.
Oh yeah, definitely. Just let us know about that, and we can even put that in the chat. Is that something we could put in the chat?
New York Times, sure.
It's a New York Times, but it was the actual link.
Yeah, it's a documentary produced by them, just talking about what does a pandemic playbook look like, and how did the rules that were written down to prevent a major pandemic outbreak, how were they not followed in this country? And here we are, one of the richest countries in the world, and with all the medical science and all the medical degrees, and what went wrong. And it kind of traces it going back from how the pandemic playbook got started to where we are today. And it's just, you know, it's just a well done video, good infotainment.
I'm definitely gonna look at that. And did it say anything about going to phase 3 at this part of the pandemic?
No, I don't remember hearing anything about that. I could have missed something at the end there. I was trying to do work too, so I probably shouldn't have been watching it today. But but it's well done.
Wow. Well, and speaking about the pandemic and how the schools are having to be forced to be open, we talked about that a lot in this town hall back when schools were reopening. I'm seeing this firsthand. I have a daughter who attends Edgewater High School, and I actually had already gotten notice that the football game was canceled, but it was on the news last night because I think we're the only high school that canceled the football game. But not surprising that happened. We had, I think there was 3 cases associated with the football team, so they're all under quarantine now.
Wow.
And I've gotten 5 calls from the school since last Wednesday, letting me know that there'd been a COVID case at the school and that they disinfected. They have a little spiel that they have to do, and they haven't closed our high school yet. I know they've closed 2 other high schools in Orange County. I don't know how they're doing up in, you're in Tallahassee. How are they doing there? I know FSU has had some issues, but it seems to be kept quiet. Is that what's happening?
Well, there was kind of a big spike when the students returned here in Tallahassee. That was in late August. And then it seems like it died down a little bit. There were some really awful videos of college kids, like, you know, doing college kid things, like in the pool with hundreds of people. Everyone's having a good time. No masks in sight. You know, everyone's just in bathing suits, which is a problem. The thing that I just saw on Twitter last night was that one of the nightclubs in town had a line out the door. It must have been, I don't know, 100 yards long, or I don't know, really a long line out, you know, multiple people. Again, not one mask in sight. And the bars are open. It's just college kids are gonna do what they do. And without leadership from the governor or elsewhere, I mean, it's just gonna continue to create this ongoing pandemic, right? So it's a problem. And one thing I'll add to that is that, so not only do I have an elementary age child, but my wife is actually an elementary school teacher. So I've been able to kind of watch her all summer. Like, there was no summer break this year for any teacher, I'll tell you that. And everyone was doing was really figuring out, how do we transition to full-time online virtual school and do it in a way that can actually connect with students, especially the young ones, right? Because the young ones, I mean, the social and emotional development of a child is so crucial at that point in time, really all the time, but especially the young ones, and trying to make sure that they are being heard, that they know they're being loved, that they know that they're safe. I mean, these are key things that are not traditional education, reading, writing, arithmetic, but it's vital to how brains develop. And to watch my wife and her colleagues meet via Zoom, like again, all summer, like no summer break, to kind of talk about these issues, to figure out how can we do right by our students and make sure they're okay. And in my wife's school, they're actually all virtual right now. So she's teaching from home right now, probably on Zoom, just like this, with 15 third graders, which, I think my job is tough, but like, that's a whole other thing. So the point is, hats off to all the educators in Florida. I know this has been a remarkably difficult period for them, putting in extra hours, and some of them are back in school, like you said, and it's a hazard. And whatever they're getting paid, it's not enough. And we all know that. So let's just hope we keep supporting our teachers every way we can, because it's what could be more important, really.
What about your child? Is your child doing, obviously your child is doing virtual school, but how is your child doing it when your wife is on the teaching and you're doing your job?
So that's really interesting. So last year, when school was canceled in March, I stayed home the whole time to help, because she had to teach. I would help him, make sure he was setting up the Zoom thing right and having his classwork organized. But this year he's in third grade and he happens to be in my wife's class.
Oh, wow.
So he's in my wife's class. So he's actually set up in like our little office area we have. My wife is set up in like the back room area we have, and they both have their little Zoom setups, and they don't like see each other all day because she wants to make sure it stays like fair for all the students, and she's not talking to her son. Everyone's a student, so she's trying to do it in the best possible way. It's a good setup. It's working for now. Again, we are extremely fortunate that we're able to do that. We're aware of that. But right now they're getting by, and I'm proud of both of them. I'll tell you that. So.
Wow. That's because I was imagining that he would be sitting right there when you said that, but then I see what she's doing. She's making it so he has the same experience as the rest of the class, and that's incredible.
Yeah, it's an incredibly difficult job, and like I said, third grade. I mean, a lot of them are, it's still third grade, but they're more able to be independent, and they know they can handle their work if the worksheet is explained fine. They know what they're doing. It's really the younger kids that I'm just concerned about, because I mean, again, the social, emotional development of these kids is so important. And I'm hoping that, they get the help and love and attention and security that kids need. I'm hoping.
Yeah. And I'm hoping that the schools so far, I feel like they're trying to be safe. And I think the reason why they're doing as well as they're doing is because there's less than half of the kids there. Because obviously with all the kids there, it would be a disaster. That's the way I'm looking at it, even though our cases are ticking up, but I just can't imagine what they would be like if everyone had gone back to school.
Yeah, it'd be wild, right? And I've talked to a lot of teachers around the state, just various people, and I'm hearing that unfortunately, I mean, the legislature didn't come back for the special session this summer. I'm not sure if you were on that call, but yeah, fantastic. Because it seems like if there was ever a time for the legislature to come back to Tallahassee or figure out some way to meet, to discuss some really vital issues that are happening in the state, from the budget to schools reopening to, I mean, certainly there's a lot to talk about in racial equity. And to not come back to discuss these major issues, that's like, what a missed opportunity, kind of. And
well, in the unemployment situation, that was
of course, unemployment number one, right? I mean, that was the huge problem. Yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah, and I realized the safety aspect of it. I truly believe that it could have been done virtually at that point, at the height of the pandemic. It could be done. I mean, we're having trials. I believe I saw a jury trial was done virtually. So there's no excuse why we couldn't have had a special session.
Yeah, I think I saw in Virginia, the Virginia Assembly, or whatever they call it, I'm forgetting now, they actually set up in like a large gym, and everyone had like, 6 feet apart and the whole thing. So it was set up that way, and it seemed to work for them. I mean, we've got the Donald, Tucker Civic Center right here in Tallahassee, just a couple blocks from the Capitol. There's plenty of room there. I mean, that's where FSU plays basketball. You could set up there with clearly plenty of space. Staffers could be spread out. It could really be a way to work, but it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah, I just heard a UCF has they're doing their band and chorus in the parking garage. That's where they're.
Oh, really? Wow.
It was interesting. And then I saw on the news, I'm very interested in that because I was in band, but the instruments, they have like plastic over the end of the instruments, like the trombones and the trumpets. And it's just interesting what everyone is trying to come up with so they can still do what they love to do.
I know, like the spit valve round, right? That's a huge, that's a liability, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I played flute, but I remember the trumpets would be behind me and I would look back there and there would be a puddle of spit, where they empty their instruments on the ground. It's
So the parking garage seems like the place to be. I'll tell you that. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and then there's the singing, which that's, they say, is one of the biggest spreading. My daughter is in chorus, and they actually they sang with masks on. So
how'd it go? Is she okay with it?
I'm still kind of on the fence on it. It was last night. They haven't met at all. They've been meeting virtually, but they wanted to have a virtual concert. But in order to have a virtual concert, they had to get together to record the concert, and they did it. They separated out the groups and then social distanced and wore a mask. So I'm just waiting, hopefully everything will be okay. But I have to admit, that's scared me. I feel like that's the closest I've gotten to being exposed to the virus. I've been able to quarantine because we are able to do all these meetings virtually. And ever since we came back from Tallahassee in March, my staff has been virtual as well. And thankfully, because of all the technology, it's been fine. I miss not being around people, of course, but we've definitely been able to do our work. And
yeah, and the political world doesn't stop, so everyone is managing as best they can. So I agree. I mean, I've been on Zoom, straight since March, and fortunately, I have my own office here in my building where I work, so I can kind of cordon off here and not have to see anybody, so I can stay right here. But yeah, I mean, I'll admit though, like this is what a position of privilege it is to be able to do that. And I can talk to you via Zoom like this, as opposed to having to go, wait tables, which I did for many years, or work in a retail store, which I also did for many years. And I realize I'm fortunate, and again, hats off to all those workers who have to show up to work every day and they need to make a paycheck and they need to go to their job and they have to interact with people all the time. So again,
absolutely. Yes. And they don't, a lot of them don't have health care. And that's that just blows my mind when I think about all those people that are on the front lines and don't have health care. Right. And they're the most likely to get COVID.
Wild stuff.
Yeah, this is not, we're not living in a good time right now, that's for sure. But we can just keep plugging away and fighting, and that's all we can do.
Yeah, and again, it's people like us who rely on leaders like you to, make sure that we get the good fight where we have to. And again, all of our energy, we can only do so much on the outside. And we kind of channel all of it to our leaders to try to get to the best policy and fight for what's right. So again, just on behalf of everyone in Florida, and just thank you for what you do to help get good policies passed in Florida. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And that reminds me of a question I had when you said that your funds were protected. How are those funds protected? Because the Sadowski Trust Fund gets rated on a regular basis. How is your funds different that it's not getting rated on a regular basis?
So Amendment 1 from 2014, the Water and Land Conservation Amendment, it added a section to the Constitution that says specifically that 33% of an already collected tax, which is the dock stamp revenue, so when you buy a house, that tax, 33% of that gets put automatically into the Land Acquisition Trust Fund, and it actually explicitly states in the Constitution what that money can be spent on. I don't have like the actual verbiage in front of me right now, but it's things like land acquisition, Everglades restoration, land management, springs, I think is mentioned, or springs are mentioned specifically. So here's been the problem over the years, right? Is that yes, for the most part, that money, for a large chunk of that money has been spent appropriately on things like Everglades restoration. I mean, we've seen money for Everglades restoration just skyrocket since 2014, largely because of this amendment, and that's fantastic. Unfortunately, where the legislature has kind of played a little bit, and this is why there is a lawsuit. We're not party to that lawsuit, so I'm not going to talk about it. But the legislature did get sued because they were taking some of that money for things that weren't listed in the Constitution, right? So for quick example, and this is the easiest example I explain to anyone, Amendment 1 was essentially paying for the entire IT budget at the Department of Environmental Protection. So every single, anytime someone comes in to fix someone's Outlook or set up someone's computer, it doesn't matter what they're doing. It doesn't even have to be conservation related. I mean, it's the IT department for the oil and gas drilling department in DEP, right? So that money is paying the IT department, every single IT worker in the Department of Environmental Protection, which I think is clearly not what voters voted for. That wasn't a ton of money, but still it's plenty of money on what we could do with it, right? It could make a remarkable amount of good. There are numerous examples like that of things very similar that are like, oh, that's not what voters voted for. It says very clearly land acquisition, Everglades restoration, land management, all these different things, and they're paying for other things with it that seemingly aren't conservation related. So that's been a problem, but they haven't taken all of it. So I do think that there's a large chunk of that money that is going to go to conservation no matter what. But again, it's the Florida legislature. As you know, crazy things happen sometimes. So we'll be watching as closely as we can to make sure that all of that money is spent appropriately.
Yeah, so I think what you were saying then is that money was supposed to be additional money, and instead they took some of that and used it for what was budgeted before in the past out of the general fund or whatever that's what you're saying? Yeah. And the same type of thing that happened with education and the lottery where, yeah. Well, we are coming up on the hour. So I think we'll go ahead and wrap up, but thank you so much, Jonathan, for being here. And again, Jonathan Weber is with the Florida Conservation Voters and gave us a very good overview of number 4. Did I say that right? Number 4, and why we should be in opposition, vote no to number 4 for many reasons. Thank you so much, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure. Best of luck to you and everyone during this difficult time. We're going to get through it together. I hope everyone registers to vote. October 5th is the deadline. We're getting close. So thank you all so much.
Yes, great. Thank you.